They shoved her into a cage with a killer dog just to watch her scream. But when the growl never came, everyone froze. What the dog did next, no one saw coming. They called it a game, a test, a dare. But Maya Dorsey knew better. At 12, she'd already learned that cruelty wrapped in laughter cuts deeper than silence. That the most dangerous things at Solace Hill weren't the dogs or the electric fences, but the sons of people who never heard no. It started near the pool, where the water sparkled like glass, and the kids wore smiles with sharp edges. Arlo, the ringleader, tossed a tennis ball lazily into the air as he spoke, each word soaked in mockery. "You want to hang out with us, Cook's kid?" he asked. "Prove you're not soft." Maya didn't respond. She never did when Arlo talked like that. But standing still didn't save her. "Let's see if she's brave enough for the real test," he grinned, his voice slick with false charm. Two boys flanked her before she could move, clutching her arms like she was some object to be positioned, not a person to be respected. "Don't," she whispered, heels digging into the lawn. "Please don't." But no one was listening. They dragged her across the manicured grass toward the edge of the estatada, part no one talked about at parties, where the air felt heavier, older, where the trees leaned in like they were holding secrets. There, behind rusted fencing and a locked iron gate, waited Shadow. The Belgian Malinois had become legend at Solace Hill. Rumors flew like wind through the staff quarters. He was military. He snapped during a mission. He was trained to kill. No one walked past his enclosure alone. Maya had only seen him from a distance, pacing, always pacing, like a ghost trapped in muscle and bone. There was something about the way he moved, purposeful but restless, that made you think he wasn't entirely here. "Let's see if the mutt still got teeth," Arlo smirked, pulling a small silver key from his shorts pocket. Maya's heart clenched. "Don't," she begged again. "He's not just a dog." Arlo didn't reply. He opened the gate. And with one shove hard and careless, Maya fell forward. Her knees hit gravel, palms scraping open. The gate slammed behind her. The lock clicked. Silence. For a long second, she didn't move. Her breath came in short, hot bursts. The summer sun seared her neck, but her skin ran cold. Then footsteps. Not human, measured, soft, and then he was there. Shadow. He stood maybe 10 feet away, muscles taut beneath his fur, ears slightly forward. His eyes, amber and ancient, pierced through her, like they were trying to remember her face from a dream. He didn't growl. He didn't charge. He just stared. From outside, the kids quieted. One phone dropped lower, no longer confident in what it was capturing. No one expected this kind of stillness. No one knew what it meant. But Maya did. This wasn't aggression. This was memory. And maybe, just maybe, recognition. Her voice barely lifted above the wind. "I'm not going to hurt you," she whispered. Shadow didn't flinch. He tilted his head slightly. Slowly, with trembling fingers, Maya extended her scraped hand. Not pushing, not forcing, just offering. Shadow moved. One step. Another. Then he stopped in front of her, close enough to feel the heat of his breath. He lowered his head, sniffed the blood on her palm, and exhaled a sound more like a sigh than a snarl. Then he sat. Just like that. Maya let out a breath she didn't realize she'd been holding. Her knees were shaking, but she stayed upright, frozen in awe, in disbelief, in something dangerously close to peace. And that's when footsteps thundered behind the group. Shoes polished to a mirror shine slammed against stone. Carlton Salas had arrived. Tall, silver-haired, and built like the marble statues lining his courtyard. The man radiated control like it was stitched into his skin. The children parted like mist. Even Arlo backed up. "What in God's name is going on here?" His voice cracked through the heat like thunder. No one answered. Carlton's eyes moved from the kids to the open gate, to the girl in the enclosure, and finally to the dog. Shadow remained seated beside Maya, unmoving. No teeth, no tension. Just presence. Carlton's jaw tightened. His gaze was calculating, cold. She went into a restricted zone, he said, tone-clipped. That dog was scheduled for termination in 4 days. Maya opened her mouth, but the words caught. Then something inside her rose, something fierce and fragile. He's not dangerous, she said quietly. Carlton blinked once. Slow. No? He challenged. You're a handler now? She stood up, blood still drying on her hands. No, sir, but I think he's just alone and scared. Carlton considered her. For one long, breathless moment, no one moved. Then he gave a single nod. 3 days, he said. You prove that dog safe under control or he's gone. And so are you. He turned. The kids followed, silent now. Only Maya remained. And Shadow. He didn't leave her side. That night, she lay in bed, unable to sleep, the sting of her scraped hands fading beneath something elsy warmth that had started in that cage and hadn't left. A beginning. Not of friendship, not yet, but of something older, something earned. And tomorrow, she'd be back, not because someone told her to, but because in Shadow's silence, she had finally been seen. The night was heavy with silence. Not just outside, but inside Maya, too. The kind of silence that doesn't scare you, but settles into your bones, reshaping the way you breathe. She hadn't eaten much. Her scraped hands stung as she tapped through online forums on Violet's discarded tablet. Dog behavior theory, trauma triggers, positive reinforcement. Half the terms felt like a foreign language, but she soaked them in anyway. Desperation made her fluent in things she'd never known yesterday. One thread stood out. A simple quote from a retired handler. Command less, observe more. That stuck. By dawn, the estate shimmered with quiet perfection. Again polished marble, trimmed hedges, and not a blade of grass out of place. But beyond the beauty, Maya saw something else now. Control. Walls built to contain not just dogs, but people like her. Still, she crossed the lawn. Her shoes were still dirty from yesterday. She didn't care. In one hand, she clutched a sandwich bag filled with bits of grilled chicken she'd carefully saved from the Langstons' leftovers. In the other, nothing. No leash, no whistle, just presence. Shadow was already awake, standing in the center of his pen like a statue carved in tension. His ears flicked once when he saw her, but he didn't move, didn't pace like before. He just watched. Maya stopped 3 feet from the fence, sat cross-legged in the grass, and said nothing. She placed a piece of chicken near the fence note inside, not tossed toward him, just close enough for scent. Then she waited. Shadow didn't approach. He didn't turn away either. 5 minutes passed, then 10. Her legs ached. The grass itched her knees, but she stayed still. And finally, Shadow sat too. Not close, not because of the food, just with her. It wasn't magic. It wasn't a breakthrough, but it was something Maya understood instinctively. He didn't want control. He wanted calm. Later that afternoon, she returned again, this time with a small notepad tucked in her pocket filled with shaky sketches of hand signals she'd copied from online videos. Sit. Stay. Come. She stood near the fence. Shadow mirrored 100 feet away. She raised her hand palm flat, fingers up. Sit. Shadow tilted his head. She repeated it, slower, less like a trainer, more like a question. He didn't obey. He chose. His hind legs lowered, body folding into a seated position. Maya's breath caught. Good, she whispered, not louder than the wind. Stay. She stepped back. Shadow remained still, his eyes locked on her every move. Come, she crouched slightly, hand low. Shadow moved 2 steps, then paused. It wasn't perfect, but it was deliberate. Somewhere behind her, she heard a soft scrape metal on stone. She turned. Standing by the hedge was Mr. Haldenthie Estate's caretaker, older than most of the trees here, always smelling faintly of tobacco and pine oil. He didn't speak. He just nodded once, then turned and walked away. Maya didn't think much of it until evening. She returned after dinner, slipping through the back path with a flashlight and a folded towel. The air smelled like wet stone and lilacs. When she reached the fence, something was waiting for her hooked gently on the corner post. A collar, faded leather, its brass buckle dulled by time. Stitched into the inside band were faint letters. Canine Shadow Unit, Lima 241st. She held it like a relic. This wasn't a pet accessory. This was history. Proof. Shadow didn't come forward, but when she lifted the collar to the chain link, he sniffed once and then nudged it with his nose. Like he remembered. Maya didn't try to put it on. Not yet. Some things needed to be offered, not claimed. She tucked the collar carefully into her hoodie pocket and sat beside the fence again, the moonlight stretching long shadows between them. Inside that enclosure stood a dog the world had written off. Outside sat a girl no one thought could matter. But between them, something fragile and powerful had begun to grow. Not obedience, not fear, but choice. The collar felt heavier than Maya expected. She held it in both hands that morning, standing just beyond the dew-soaked fence. The leather was warm from the sun, cracked but solid, its brass buckle dulled to a muted gold. The stitched letters were faint but clear. Canine Shadow, Unit Lima 241st. Shadow stood waiting, not anxious, not eager, just still. "I'm not putting it on you," Maya murmured. "Not unless you let me." She crouched, held it near the gate, let the leather hang loosely from her fingers. Shadow stepped forward. No hesitation, no flinch. He lowered his head, just slightly enough. Maya slipped the collar around his neck, fastened it gently, then stepped back. Something in his posture changed. It wasn't obvious not to anyone who didn't know him, but Maya did now. His spine straightened, his ears relaxed. He wasn't guarding anymore. He was remembering. And that meant it was time. She reached into her backpack and pulled out 3 items. A pouch of fabric strips infused with household scents, an old whistle she'd borrowed from Halden's shed, and a notepad scrawled with commands used in scent drills. Scent detection, pattern sweeps, decision-based impulse control. Not tricks. Tasks. She entered her notes with a level of obsession that would have scared her a week ago. But now, it felt like honor. Shadow didn't wag his tail when she worked with him. He didn't drool at treats or roll on his back and play. He moved like he was built for it. When Maya hid the scent strips behind garden stones, Shadow didn't sniff randomly. He scanned, nose low, shoulders taut, a tight S pattern. He reached the right target every time. When she gave directional signal shan flicks, one-note whistle she adjusted like a machine trained not just to respond, but to anticipate. This wasn't a dog following a routine. This was memory doing push-ups beneath a scarred coat. And Maya felt it, the weight of what he once was. Not a guard, not a pet. A partner. Someone was watching. Maya spotted movement near the hedge. It was Violet, Arlo's little sister, barefoot, silent, wrapped in an oversized hoodie. Her hair was in a messy braid, and her arms were folded tight. She said nothing, but she stayed. By late afternoon, Maya was ready to try something she hadn't dared yet. She opened the gate, walked inside. No bait, no leash, just her and the sound of grass cracking beneath her shoes. Shadow didn't move. She walked halfway in, then paused. He approached. One step, then another, until he reached her side. No growl, no caution, just alignment. They turned and walked together. He matched her pace shoulder to thigh, eyes flicking up with every shift in her body. They did a full perimeter loop, then another. When she finally stopped, Shadow sat beside her, calm, centered, not waiting for a command, just being. Later that night, Maya returned to the tiny staff quarters where she and her mom slept in bunked beds, their entire world folded into one dimly lit corner of Solace Hill. On her cot lay something unexpected. A book. well worn, with a cracked navy blue cover, the combat mind of the German Shepherd. No note, no explanation, until she opened the front flap. Inside, in careful handwriting, a single line. "He's not who they say he is," signed with a small initial. Maya stared at the sentence long after the lights went out. Outside the window, Shadow paced once, then curled near the fence. Not a prisoner. Not anymore. Just a soldier waiting for orders in his own terms. The third morning broke cold and colorless. Clouds hung low over Solace Hill, casting the marble estate in pale gray. Even the fountains, always pristine and theatrical, seemed muted, like the whole place was holding its breath. Maya didn't eat. She sat on the edge of her cot, lacing her boots with hands that trembled not from fear, but from the weight of what came next. Her mother hadn't said much that morning, only placed a clean jacket on Maya's chair and whispered, "Be careful." She knew why. Everyone did. Today wasn't just a test. It was a final judgment. By 9 a.m., a matte black government SUV glided through the gates like a knife through silk. No engine roar, no screeching tires, just silent arrival. From it stepped Colonel Raymond Sawyer, retired U.S. Army canine evaluator. Tall, angular, and dressed in a pressed gray coat, he looked more like an executioner than a man here to watch a dog. Carlton Solace met him on the stone walkway. They shook hands like businessmen closing a deal. No smiles, no chatter, just purpose. Maya waited by the training enclosure, Shadow sitting calmly beside her, his leather collar gleaming faintly in the morning light. Sawyer approached, eyes scanning everything, the terrain, the fence, the dog. He didn't greet Maya. He didn't need to. "Begin with a basic obedience set," he said, voice dry, clipped. "On lead." Maya swallowed hard and clipped the leash to Shadow's collar. He didn't resist. He stood tall, still, steady. "Sit," she said. Shadow sat. "Stay." He froze, unblinking. "Come." He walked toward her, slow and centered. Sawyer made a note in a small black notebook. "Off lead," he said. Maya unclipped the leash. She moved through hand signal, sit, down, heel. Shadow performed with smooth precision, no wasted motion, no hesitation. Then came directional drills. She pointed left. Shadow moved. Right, again. She sent him across the enclosure with a double hand flick. He obeyed, circled back. Sawyer watched, silent. But then, just as Maya cued a final come, Shadow froze mid-step. His body stiffened. His ears twitched. His eyes flicked not to her, but toward the trees beyond the far shed. Maya frowned. "Shadow," she said softly. "Come." Nothing. Just stillness. Too still. Then she saw it. Arlo, crouched behind the tool shed, a small metallic object pressed to his lips, sharp, gleaming in the sun. A high-frequency whistle. Sabotage. Shadow's ears flicked again, his muscles tightened. Maya's heart plummeted. "Shadow," she repeated louder. "Ignore him. Eyes on me." Colonel Sawyer raised a brow. "What's happening?" But Maya didn't answer. Her gaze was locked on Shadow's posture, how his tail lowered, not in fear but in calculation. He wasn't disobeying. He was trying to choose between instincts. And then it happened. A sound, not loud, not sharp. A growl. Low, gravelly, measured. It lasted less than a second, but it split the morning open like a crack in glass. Sawyer closed his notebook. "Behavioral instability," he said flatly. "That's a red flag." "No," Maya said quickly, stepping forward. "He's being provoked." "He growled," Sawyer cut in. "He's reactive. That's all it takes." "No," her voice cracked. "That's not who he is. He's been—" But she didn't get to finish, because at that moment, a scream shattered the air. From the main house, everyone turned. The kind of scream that pulls the earth out from under you. Panic, sharp and unfiltered. It was Violet. "Sylvie's seizing!" Chaos erupted. Sawyer spun. Carlton broke into a run. But Shadow? Shadow didn't wait. He bolted. Not wild, not aggressive, just precise. His paws hit the grass like gunshots, his body moving with the speed of instinct honed by purpose. Maya chased after him, heart in her throat. Inside the sunroom, the scene unraveled in frantic motion. Sylvie, on the marble floor, limbs convulsing violently, eyes rolled back. A housekeeper knelt, frozen with fear, phone still in her shaking hands. Violet sobbed beside her. But Shadow stopped 3 feet away. He didn't bark. He didn't lunge. He sat, his body still, his eyes locked onto Sylvie, reading something in her that no human could explain. Then he inched forward. Deliberate, gentle. He lowered his head and placed it against her trembling hand. And Sylvie responded. Her fingers twitched, then curled into his fur. Shadow licked her hand on Sislo, firm. Sawyer, standing in the doorway, said nothing. He watched. Maya knelt nearby, breathless. And Carlton? He just stared. Not at Sylvie. At Shadow. At everything he thought he knew about Broken Dog Sand, the girl beside him who never gave up. The paramedics arrived minutes later. By then, Sylvie had calmed, her breathing even. Her fingers still clutched in Shadow's coat like an anchor. No one said a word about Maya's trial after that. There was nothing left to say. Later that night, Maya sat in the dark near the enclosure. Shadow lay beside her, his body pressed against her leg. The stars blinked overhead, quiet and indifferent. But Maya knew something sacred had shifted. Not in paperwork, not in rules, but in truth. You could train a dog to sit, to stay, to obey. But what Shadow had done today, that came from something deeper, something no whistle could summon, and no man could silence. No one clapped. No cheers, no smiles, no arms thrown around Maya in celebration. The estate returned to its rhythm like nothing had happened. But everything had. The fountains ran, the silver trays were polished, the hedges trimmed with brutal precision. Yet the silence that followed wasn't cold anymore. It felt suspended, like everyone was waiting for someone else to speak first. No one did. Maya woke early the next day. Her legs ached. Her mind replayed the trial in flashes, Shadow's growl, Sawyer's frown, Sylvie's scream, the way Shadow had moved without being told. Her mother was already in the kitchen, slicing fruit like every morning before. But today, she paused when Maya entered and offered something rare, a soft hand, resting on her daughter's shoulder. Just that. It was enough. On the table beside the breadbasket sat a folded note, unmarked except for a single name at the bottom. Carlton Solace. Maya unfolded it with fingers that trembled. Weekly supervised training. Enclosure remains. Maya Dorsey assigned as primary handler. CS. That was it. No praise. No apology. Just the kind of power you only give when you've been proven wrong and can't say it out loud. Later that afternoon, Maya returned to the training field. The air smelled of cut grass and cold stone. Shadow waited near the fence, still and upright. But something new had appeared. On the wooden post just beside the gate hung a small black box, tied with worn twine. No tag, no message. Mr. Halden stood 10 feet away, arms crossed, his expression unreadable. He nodded once. Maya opened the box slowly. Inside lay an old service medal, round, dull with time. Its ribbon had frayed into a soft gray. She turned it over, breath catching in her throat. Unit Lima. Service beyond self. It wasn't flashy. It wasn't polished. But it was real. Shadow stepped forward and touched the medal with his nose, just once, then sat beside her like he'd always belonged there. Halden spoke quietly. That medal belonged to Shadow's first handler. Maya looked up. He earned it, the old man added. But he never got to wear it. War took him, left the dog behind. Maya swallowed the lump rising in her throat. Now, Halden said, his voice like worn gravel, it's back where it belongs. And he walked away. That evening, something unexpected happened. Sylvie came back. Still pale, still fragile, her steps slow and deliberate. Her mother, Victoria, walked beside her, hand out just enough to catch her if she faltered but not holding her back. They reached the fence. Sylvie sat down in the grass without a word. Shadow didn't rush. He approached slowly, each movement precise. Then, gently, he laid his head in her lap. Sylvie stroked his ears. Victoria hesitated, then knelt beside her daughter. Her hand hovered for a moment before resting softly on Shadow's back. There were no cameras, no commands, just silence that felt sacred. From the balcony above, Carlton Salas watched. He didn't speak, he didn't shift. But when his eyes met Maya's once he gave a single nod. The first he'd ever offered her. Not a reward, not an approval. Recognition. Later, after the sun dipped behind the sycamores and the sky turned the color of old copper, Maya sat outside the enclosure again, her legs stretched in the grass, the metal resting in her palm. Shadow lay beside her, breathing slow, ears flicking only when the wind changed. From her jacket pocket, she pulled a torn slip of notebook paper, the one Mr. Halden had tucked into the box behind the metal. Just one line. Some dogs follow orders. Some choose the right person. You found the second kind. Maya didn't cry. She didn't need to. She leaned her head back against the fence, the stars blinking quietly overhead. Her hand dropped, resting lightly on Shadow's shoulder. He didn't move. Didn't need to. Tomorrow, they'd start drills again. The week after, a new evaluator would arrive. The program was official now. There would be paperwork, schedules, oversight. But none of that mattered tonight. Because what they'd built together didn't come from instruction manuals or formal titles. It came from bruised trust and small kindnesses. From a girl who wasn't supposed to be seen. And a soldier who was never meant to be loved again. And so they sat. A girl and a dog. No applause. No spotlight. Just purpose.